So you're thinking about making a move to Chicago or making a move in Chicago this year in 2025. Well, you may be thinking about how is the real estate market. So today's video, we're gonna be breaking down alongside my business partner, Quentin Green, the current state of the 2025 Chicago real estate market. We're gonna talk about macro trends. We're gonna zoom into what does the market look like for buyers, what does the market look like for sellers, as well as investors, and how you can capitalize on the market that we're currently in today. You may heard that it's been incredibly competitive, and if you are a buyer in today's market, it is certainly so. So today's video is packed with tips, tricks, insights, and trends that we're seeing to make sure that you are prepared and you are educated at the highest level so you can make intelligent buying and selling decisions. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jordan Pyle. I'm your go-to Chicago real estate agent. My team and I have been servicing the city for the last 11 years, and we'd be honored to help you achieve your real estate goals. And so if you have any questions or you want to start the process with our team, feel free to just text the number on the screen, and a team member or myself will get in touch within 24 hours. Additionally, if you want some free resources, we send out a bi-weekly newsletter talking about all things Chicago down in the description below. So like I said, today's video is with my business partner, Quentin Green, and we're gonna be breaking down the current 2025 state of the Chicago real estate market. All right, let's do it. All righty, so I got the man, the myth, Quentin Green here. Quentin, how you doing today?
Good, man, how you doing?
Doing good, doing good. So as I mentioned at the intro of this video, Quentin and I wanna give everyone that's listening a snapshot of the current state of the market for the Chicago real estate market in 2025. We are basically starting the beginning of March. And so if you're time stamping this, we're giving you relevant data and information as of the beginning of March 2025. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, that Quentin is my partner in our business here in Chicago. As this channel has continued to grow, we have found the need to make sure that we have the best of the best servicing you in your moves to Chicago or making a move around in Chicago. So the framework of today is we're just wanting to give you a snapshot of a few different things. We want to give you the snapshot of the macro trends in the real estate market, not only locally, but also throughout the United States, and how these trends are being impacted by some of the bigger picture stuff happening in the world today. And then we want to go into, some of the questions and the answers that you may have if you're a buyer, if you're a seller, or if you're an investor in the Chicago market or thinking about making a purchase or a sale in the Chicago market. And so that's kind of the general framework. We're going to start kind of wider, and then we're going to narrow it down. We're going to talk a little bit about opportunities that we see. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that we see out there in working with buyers and sellers. And the goal is just for you to walk away more educated than when you came and watched this video. And so does that sound good to you, Quentin?
Rock and roll.
All right, let's do it. So macro trends, we are 2025. What are you seeing out there right now? We're what we call in Chicago kind of the unofficial spring market. And that typically starts, right around like the Super Bowl. Every year, it seems like it's starting earlier and earlier in the last,
Right.
5 years or so. But you're working with a lot of buyers, a lot of sellers, and investors, and also renters. And so if you could kind of take a macro approach to what you're seeing in the Chicago real estate market and nationally right now, what would be your answer to that?
Yeah, well, I would say like we're really seeing a lot of the same as we did last year going into this, really busy spring market, if not, a little bit busier than I think last year. I definitely would say we're seeing a lot more like kind of, I guess, like when I don't get offers, right? When we don't get offers accepted on the buy side, I guess I'm a little bit more surprised than I was last year to find out that we didn't get it. And then you find out what that price is, if the agent's nice enough to tell you, right? And so that has definitely been something compared to last year where like there are just some really, really crazy, numbers out there for if you want to get something under contract, right? We're seeing, it's not uncommon to have 10 offers on a property, sub 600K in, West Town, Bucktown, Wicker Park, Lincoln Park, Lakeview, right? Like those are the hottest neighborhoods last year. They continue to be the hottest neighborhoods this year as well. And I think part of what is sort of like really fueling the market now is if you go back and look at last year, and last year was like a really, really strong market, whether it was condos or single family homes in most of these core neighborhoods that we generally focus on. But interest rates were actually going up throughout the year, right? So we started off the year with like, lower interest rates than I believe we ended. But if you go back and look in like January, like, we were just seeing a general uptrend in interest rates. And I think I think we could both say that, we had a lot of people that punted last year into this year. And there's still people who are going to be punting this year going in next year. That's what happens every year. But we did have a lot of people who did that last year. But the one thing with this year is we're actually starting the year with declining interest rates, and I think that type of mentality, going into a spring market is really it's good for buyers, but it also means that it's going to probably be busier than it was last year. And I could say for sure, so far it has. We're just seeing more multiple offers. We're going to be seeing some big positive price growth here in Chicago. I know nationally that a lot of respectable forecasters are expecting prices to be relatively flat, if not maybe a little bit lower. Certainly in a lot of markets, but as of right now, in the vast majority of our submarkets, we're going to see another year of positive price growth. There's no question about it, unless something happens in the tail end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds, what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing you say, is, we have this kind of scarcity effect, right? We had people that saw interest rates going from, 2.5 years ago, they were, in the 4s, then they jumped all the way up to, I think, peaking around, 8%. And all last year, it was okay, things keep going up. Things are starting to become more and more unaffordable. And to your point, as we kind of round the corner through the actual winter time in Chicago, and also the start of the spring market, which in Chicago, if you're not familiar, if you don't yet live here, our spring market is really when it's still the winter season, but it picks up right after the Super Bowl, like I mentioned before. And so now we are seeing this downward pressure on interest rates, as Quentin said. And so I think it's almost like this perfect storm that's coming. The spring market's rushing in, interest rates are coming down, things are getting more affordable. We have new administration in place. And, it's probably going to be a pretty frothy year for real estate. So if you're a seller, you're probably positioned pretty well. And we'll talk more about that later. If you're a buyer, make sure you're educated, make sure you're starting in advance, you're teaming up with a good real estate agent, a good lender, a good attorney, to make sure that before you enter into this market, you have your ducks in a row, because it is pretty competitive from the buy side. So I think that's really good insights. What would you say, and not to get political here, but the new administration coming in, how do you think that that's going to impact where things are going for home buyers and sellers in 2025?
Well, I mean, I think for one, obviously Trump's a controversial guy, and, my goal is not to indicate what my opinion is or anything along those lines. But the one thing that was, I would say, probably one of the most positive things of his administration was what he did with opportunity zones, right? And regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, it was a good program. And that program is going to be expanded during this administration as well, right? So there certainly will be, we'll see exactly what that ends up looking like. Yeah. Not to get too into the weeds, there's a lot of things like higher level, right, that generally is going to come with a Republican administration. Things along the lines of bonus depreciation. We'll likely see that come back to some extent, if I had to guess. And that really applies to investment properties, right? When you're doing 100% bonus depreciation, if you're a real estate investor, you're basically able to go buy property. Typically, this is going to be through a 1031 exchange, and you're able to take the depreciation over, a 27.5-year schedule, and potentially, be able to front load that into the first few years in order to take those substantial write-ups. So I'm definitely expecting to see some reform in bonus depreciation that will likely favor, real estate investors in general, right? That has a big impact on commercial real estate, and we know that obviously commercial real estate has been hands down the worst performing asset over the past 3 years, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think will be a huge benefit, especially for our urban centers, is bringing people back into the office, right? Mm-hmm. Clearly, this administration is indicating to the public that they want to see people in offices, right? They're trying to get a lot of the federal employees back into offices. With that being said, they are selling off a lot of assets, and they're also downsizing quite a bit. That seems to be quite clear. But I do think that a lot of these CEOs, a lot of these companies are looking at this administration saying, all right, they're trying to really change the broader narrative of what work from home looks like, and it just gives employers that ability to have a little bit more negotiating power, I think, in these employer-employee relationships. And I do think that you're going to see, more less vacancy in commercial real estate. You're going to see more people going back to the office, which supports our, broader downtown neighborhoods throughout the entire country, right? It means, restaurants do better. It means, retail does better. All these things, like, because a lot of these subcomponents in real estate, they would not exist if it weren't for foot traffic, right? And so I do think that'll come back. The other thing I will point out is, there's all this stuff going on with Doge, and to what extent it actually has a real legitimate impact on, our deficit is not clear, I think, at this point at all. They're really just targeting non-discretionary spending for now, and we'll see if they actually end up attacking some bigger line items in the budget. But, and whether or not, Elon Musk truly is a representative of the administration is not clear, but he has gone out and he said they are trying to attack the 10-year treasury, right? And obviously, the 10-year treasury is essentially what sets the bar when it comes to mortgage rates, right? Generally you're going to, in a normal spread environment, you'll see, 30-year mortgage rates be about 2 points higher than the 10-year treasury. That is, to me, what has been clear that this administration has signaled is they are going after the 10-year through deficit reduction more than anything else. And also trying, that so far, we are seeing the 10-year come down. If this continues on, we'll see. And to what impact the administration is actually having on the 10-year versus just the bond market's training, it's not clear. My guess is there is probably a bigger impact than what people think. But in general, yeah, that is how you get mortgage rates down if you go after the 10-year, and that seems to be what they're trying to do.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll see what happens, right? We'll see where rates end up at the end of the year, and we'll say whether we're right or wrong or somewhere in the middle. But, as soon as rates start coming down, it unlocks affordability, as we talked about, for so many more people. And in a market like Chicago, where majority of the market is very tight with inventory, where it's more of a seller's market, there's way more demand than there's supply. That extra affordability, maybe it benefits you as a seller, but if you're on the buy side, that's going to force more competition into the market, ultimately raising the year-over-year appreciation of home prices. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword in both ways, but I think that's a good summary, kind of from a macro standpoint, where we see things going. I think in a lot of markets throughout the country, where things are starting to soften a little bit. But I think in Chicago, there's really no clues of, the market just being flooded with a ton of inventory and us leveling out. So I think if you're a buyer, again, roll your sleeves up. If you're a seller, you're probably going to be able to sell pretty fast and for a good price.
Yeah, well, not only that, but also we're starting the year off with less inventory in most of our markets than we were last year, right? So we're still in that downtrend of less inventory. That's not the same with a lot of other metros. But our markets in particular, even when you look into the downtown markets, obviously inventory really kind of peaked out in 21, maybe late 2022. And we've been seeing that slowly come down, but we're still continuing to see that come down. And then we're really still seeing less inventory in the broader neighborhood markets, which have just been on an absolute tear over the past few years.
Yeah. And so you've heard me talk about this on the channel before, but Chicago's a tale of two cities. I'm gonna quote our friend and colleague Matt Larissy to that, and he's right. I mean, we very much so have two different markets. We have the downtown, dense, more urban market. When you think about the city of Chicago, that's the market we're talking about. Where you have a lot of high-rise condos. That is more of a buyer's market than anywhere else in the city, basically. And I'm not going to say it's completely a buyer's market. It kind of depends on price points and various other factors, but that is a market where there's still a good amount of opportunity, where some investors are coming in, still being able to scoop up some good deals, finding a lot of motivated sellers that have been sitting on these condos for a long time and can't move them. Some areas like River North, Streeterville, Gold Coast, some of these buildings that have really high HOAs, so they're making affordability very difficult for a new purchaser. So you kind of have that market, and then these outskirt markets that Quentin is talking about are the ones that are on the tear, the Lincoln Parks of the world, the Bucktowns, the Lakeviews, even Westtown, West Loop, different areas like that around the city. Just things are, what are you seeing? Give us some examples right now if somebody's watching this video, they're moving from Oregon to Chicago, they want to be in Lincoln Park, they have a budget of, I don't know, $600,000. What does that environment look like right now in your eyes?
Well, it's challenging. You're not going to get the first property that you offer on, that's for sure. if you get the 5th property offer on, I'd say that's pretty good. But I just wouldn't go into it expecting it. The reality is you might write up, 5 to 10 offers before you find the right place, or until the market shifts once we get out of that, post Memorial Day. That's kind of when to me, that's when I signified we're in a different market. It's Memorial Day weekend. But yeah, it's the reality is it's not easy. I mean, something, 2.2s now, in 1,200, 1,250 square feet walk-ups in Lincoln Park, right? Like 600 is sort of that starting entry point now, right? If you want a pretty decent 2.2 condo, you're looking at 600. And then from there, if it's going to be a wider lot, maybe it's 6 units instead of, a 3-unit building, then you get into the mid to high 6s and the low 7s, right? So that's really expensive real estate for just a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And I would say that specific 2.2 in that market is like the one thing I look at where I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is what 2.2s are now. Because everyone says that, right? They're like, you look at what something's worth, in its current year, and you're like, you can't imagine it going that much higher. And like that one market, I'm just like, oh my goodness, these were in 2021, these were like, 500, right? Like it's hard to believe. New construction now, right? 750 for 2.2s in Lincoln Park. That's kind of, you don't really see anything below 750. Rarely will you see that.
So what are some of the tactics you've been using to get deals done in that range for buyers right now?
Good. Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, price is going to be the most important thing, right? I would say, price is the most important. How much are we putting down, right? That plays a big role. And then the things that are, I would say, more within your control are going to be, what are you doing? Are you taking this property as is, right? Are you open to potentially, waiving an inspection entirely, right? I generally don't recommend that clients do that, but obviously, you can, the new contract that we have, which is really nice, there is a specific line item because as is in general has just gotten watered down over the past few years, so now it's, you can do an inspection without requests. Okay. That's not as strong as is, but it definitely signifies, it's basically saying like, we're not going to mess around, like, whatever.
Nickel and dime.
Yeah. We're not going to nickel and dime. Yeah. That's kind of the general saying. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing, other things you can do, right? We're seeing a lot of, appraisal gap waivers. I would say at least half the properties I've gone under contract on the buy side, we've had some amount in an appraisal gap waiver. Okay. That basically means that, like, say you're offering, $600,000 on a property and it's listed at 550. A smart listing agent is probably going to request that you submit an appraisal gap waiver, basically saying that, it could be any amount, right? But for this case, we'll say 50 grand, right? So they want an appraisal gap waiver of 50K. And that basically means that if the appraisal comes in, below that 600K mark, you're going to make the difference up to 50K. So say the appraisal comes in at 550, you're under contract at 600, you got to find that 50K. And that could mean that you're either doing a lower down payment or you just have that money ready to go. And, you're okay with the appraisal coming in low. You want the property and you're willing to find that money to make it work. Yeah. We're certainly seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of escalation riders if they're permitted. I'm 50-50. I'm very situational on escalation riders, right? Like I think there are ways to use them, but there's also ways to have it blow up in your face potentially. So depending on the type of situation, what my relationship is with the agent on the other side of it, I will or will not do an escalation rider.
Yeah.
That part, like, I think so many people just toss them out there and it's real, like, without having a full understanding of the situation. And I just don't think that is always the best idea. And I could talk further about that if we'd want, but for now, I'll kind of just go to the next thing. And then the last thing is, what is your financing situation, right? I've had 2 offers this past week that we ended up getting because we had waived our appraisal entirely, which is basically as strong as a cash offer. Okay. Now, when I do this, I'm really having a conversation with my clients for like a good 10 minutes, really explaining to them what this means. Okay. So when you're waiving an appraisal, like, I generally do this, like, first I'll have my lender go check and make sure it's Fannie and Freddie approved. If it's like a standard walk-up or something like that, there's not really shouldn't be anything that's going to get in the way of financing. So that's generally like, of course, like some of these buildings probably aren't going to, if there's 3 units in them, they're probably not approved by Fannie and Freddie because there hasn't been a loan done in them in, a longer period of time. But for larger condo buildings, if they're already Fannie Freddie approved, lender says, okay, we're good. We shouldn't have an issue financing unless there's something on that 22.1 that, like, wasn't there, 5, 6, however many months ago when the last loan was done. But it also, basically means that like, if you lose your job or anything like that, you can't secure financing, like you're losing your earnest money, right? So if someone knows that they're good, they have the money, they're not worried about that in any way, shape, or form. Or maybe like I had one guy who was like, my dad will just co-sign the loan with me if it really comes down to it. And I was like, all right, you know what? That's the right type of answer. You have the proper mindset to be able to potentially waive mortgage. But I really try to make sure they know what they're signing up for, because it's a lot of stress sometimes if you're waiving mortgage. I will only do it with lenders that I have a good relationship with, that I know will do the deal. And certainly lenders that know that if they were to screw up, they're not getting business from me anymore either. But so like, that's the main thing, because it can be really stressful if you're waiving mortgage, right? Like it's stressful for your client and then also stressful for you, because a lot of these people are in this price point where it's the most competitive. They're first-time home buyers. They don't know how the general process works that much. So it is a lot more hand-holding. It's a lot more reassurance. But to me, if you have the right mindset, you're willing to, you understand the risks, and you want the property bad enough, waiving the appraisal is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to get a property.
Yeah. Like you said, it's cash is king. It'll always remain king for the most part, right? And so I think, what I take from that, and I talk to all my clients, and I have for years about, there's value other than price alone. And I think that it's something I continue to remind sellers. It's something I continue to remind buyers. Like sometimes convenience is makes more sense for a seller, right? Sometimes security, sometimes knowing that the team on the other side of the deal is a good one and is going to actually get to the deal, to the closing. All things considered, Quentin's right. Like price at the end of the day is the most important. Most people, if they're looking at a $600,000 offer and a 550, if there's not something significant between the two, the 600 is going to win, 9.5 out of 10 times, right? But that being said, I think if you have any questions about what we just discussed, reach out. You know how to get a hold of us. You just text the number on the screen, and a team member or myself will get in touch within 24 hours. But really, it's about getting the right team in place, getting a reputable agent on your side that has good resources, right? Meaning they have reputable people they work with. And so if you reach out to us, you're going to not only get us as your team, but you're going to get our team. And our team, I think, is really what gets deals done in today's market. And that's, primarily, like I said, kind of the three-legged stool. It's your lender, it's your attorney, and it's your real estate agent. And so the cohesiveness, having a high level of communication, an open line of communication amongst those three translates to value for you as the buyer, or for you as the client in the transaction. And so if you have questions about any of these things, feel free to reach out. But the point we're trying to get across is that there's a lot of different levers and terms in the offer that we can pull to make your offer stand out in a competitive market. And so I think that's really good insight. Let's
I'll
just
say one other thing though, that I think that like, this is sort of like not something that people not in this industry understand, is like, we've done a good amount of business in this market. And I would say both of us, like, we have a good reputation. I think other agents enjoy working with us, and we have our list of like agents that, we also enjoy working with. And unfortunately, we have our list of agents that, that we've maybe had not so good of deals with. And like, the reality is like, it definitely like matters. Like your reputation does. If you're someone who's like, easy to work with, and you're upfront, and, if you say you're going to do something, you do something, and you're doing a good job of managing expectations, like, that really, really helps. Is like some of the soft skills I think that agents have that really goes totally under the radar. Like a lot of clients like don't really understand how deal making sort of works. And like the best agents really, I think, understand that. And, they're able to pick up on certain things. They're maybe able to get a little bit more out of a client or out of an agent in a certain situation. And so that is also like, those sort of soft skills that aren't really measurable at all, like really, really matter. Like for example, like I'll tell two stories. One was a success. I think they're both successes, frankly. But we had a client, and we ended up getting a property in multiple offer situation. It was what I thought was probably the best multifamily property on the market right now that was listed on the MLS. Tons of opportunity, 8,000 square foot building. My client, he didn't have a ton of cash on hand. And this was a very capital intensive building. Like it wasn't like a gut rehab or anything like that, but it was one of those properties where, there could be some really big expenses as early as like year one that really would have been a problem. And, once I told my client that we ended up getting the property, I just sensed like a little bit of reluctance and hesitation. And like, I tried to pull that out of him, and, you know, we ended up deciding that it just wasn't really the best fit. And so this was 10 minutes after we got the news from the agent. This same agent I had just gone under contract with on, you know, $1.4 million, you know, penthouse unit that we just signed the contract that same morning. I get on the phone, I call him like, look, like, I don't think we're the right buyer for this right now. I could just see this like inspection not going too well. I did the best I could to like basically, you know, manage the expectations of my client as far as what I see, you know, coming on the inspection and how much money it's going to cost to maintain this property. I was like, look, I just think that this one could end up like going south. And I think for now we're going to pass, you know, but we appreciate it. And like the other dude, if I'm the listing agent on that side, like, I'm like, thank you. Cause you could have just strung this along. You could have been like, oh, cool. You know, it's a, you know, it was an expensive property. It was about $1.5 million multi-unit, but like, that's kind of what my gut was telling me. And like, I think a lot of agents in that situation would have just been like, oh, cool, we got it. Bam, sign the contract. But like, I sensed that in my client. I was like, I just don't think this is going to work out. And that also, you know, helps preserve my relationship with that agent as well. You know, and then the other story is like, you know, we ended up going under contract on a totally off market unit in a building, because I happen to know the agent who, you know, sold the unit below a property that we were offering on the floor above. We didn't end up getting it, unfortunately. And, you know, it was kind of shady on the listing agent side, but that's okay. So I immediately texted the agent like, hey, are they thinking about selling? And she was like, I'm literally going to a listing appointment like now. And I was like, oh my God, this is like perfect. So we literally just ended up like doing a deal like on the street right outside of the building within like, you know, 5 minutes, and like we were good to go. And, you know, then we're under contract this morning. But that's not happening if you don't have like good relationships with agents, and if agents don't like working with it, you know.
100%. And yeah, I remember, you know, us talking about that situation, and that's amazing because, and if Quentin wouldn't have said it, I would have come back to that, because I think it's an intangible, like you said, soft skill. You know, how does your agent build rapport? You know, how are they involved in the industry, you know, locally, nationally? You know, what's the reputation like? Because, you know, I think we're in a world right now, especially in Chicago, where inventory is tight, and, you know, it's about access. It's about getting in the door before other people can get in the door. And it's not to say that there's, you know, there's not the ability for the full public to see a property, but when we have connections, you know, I think in the past, this used to be more of a thing where people would do deals because they had connections and they knew who their sellers were and who their buyers were. Now it's like the consumer and the public has everything in front of them once it hits the market. And so if you can find a way to align yourself with a team that has access, that has good rapport, that has strong relationships, and that has really strong integrity too, to Quentin's point. Like, he could have taken that client, went through the process, but, you know, Quentin knows that the value of the relationship long-term is more important. So that's the team you're going to get if you reach out and work with us. I think that's a good summary of kind of where the market is, and from a competition standpoint, from a buyer, be prepared. I can't, you know, iterate that anymore. Reach out to us. I don't know, what would you say, 3-4 months in advance of when you're looking to buy, totally. Ideally. Yeah, because your typical turn time on something is, you know, give yourself a month to look for properties, to get your criteria, you know, dialed in. And then once you're actually negotiating, going under contract, you could be somewhere between 30 and 60 days. So really your life cycle of that transaction is somewhere between 45 and 90 days. But if you're reaching out 2, 3, 4 months in advance, it's just going to help us make sure that you're not rushed and that you're not getting yourself into a bad situation because of like an urgency effect and lack of preparation. So let's finalize. I know we talked kind of state of the market. We talked a little bit about mortgage rates. Like, we can't go too much into those because we'll kind of see what happens. But we talked about representing buyers. And so just couple quick tips. And most of the people that reach out from this channel are looking to buy, not sell. And if you are thinking about selling, our team would love to service you. We've been selling properties throughout the city, you know, combined experience of 18, 19 years. And we can definitely help you out. But a couple of words to the wise of somebody that maybe isn't moving to Chicago like a lot of people on this channel that reach out are, but somebody that maybe already owns in Chicago and they're thinking about selling. And for this example, let's say they don't need the equity to move up. They just want to sell in this market. What would be some recommendations you would give them if you were going on a listing appointment and advising them in this market right now?
Well, for one, you know, it's really like showing a sense of urgency, because most of the listing appointments I'm going on now, you know, people are really kind of targeting like May and June, you know, and I have to tell them that, no, this is when you, like, sooner the better right now. Like, so long as your situation allows it. But even if you're doing like a lease back, get it up sooner. And like, look, let's just get pictures. Let's get this thing ready to rock and roll. And, you know, if things end up changing where we're ready to go, we already have everything. And, you know, we're not scrambling last minute to get something, you know, listed because, you know, things change. Like, get going like early, you know, start having those conversations. The reality is, like, even on I would say from 2 weeks ago to now to 2 weeks in advance, like, we could be looking at a different price and a totally different strategy, you know? So like, I always kind of tell people, you know, I give them ranges, right? But you know, I don't have a final price until, you know, we kind of see what changes from the market wise, what is sold, what's going under contract, what hasn't sold, so on and so forth, right? So I would just say, like, always be ready sooner than later, and know that, like, the best time to sell is not in June. Okay. Like, that's one of the most difficult conversations, I think, is when you go into these listing appointments, like when you're in those like May and June months, and like, for whatever reason, sellers didn't get in touch sooner. And that's one of my main things I try to do with all my sellers. Like, I do, you know, 6-month home reviews, and I hammer it home that, like, no, you need to reach out to me like in January, December, February, March, like whatever. So that way, you know, we're not having this conversation in May and June. And, you know, for whatever reason, that's just when sellers think the best time to sell is, but it's not, because we're setting the comps now. This is where the comps get set. Okay. Is February, March, April, not in May and June. In May and June, you look at the stuff, that's when you start to see the stuff that went under contract in February, March. You see that stuff close out, right? So you finally know, all right, that's what that number is. That's what my neighbor sold for. And a lot of people think like, oh, well, they got that, so now I want maybe like 5% more. You know, and like, that's just not how it works, unfortunately. If anything, you know, you need to be priced a little bit lower or at that price point. But like, realistically, like, sometimes you need to be priced a little bit lower just to adjust for that change in seasonality. Because once you get into like May and June, we're a very lease heavy city. Like, that's where all of our leases expire for the most part, is like May, June, July, some in August, right? But like, those people are still looking earlier on. And once you get past Memorial Day weekend, you see a huge reduction in demand, because all those people have either, you know, rented again, or, you know, they punted to the next year, or they've already gone under contract on a place. And like, our market is driven by first-time home buyers, whether you like it or not. Like, first-time home buyers are what move the market. That's what makes prices go up, is the first-time home buyers. And right now, the median age of the first-time home buyer is about 38 years old, which is like really, really old. Like, when we were like pre-COVID, I think that number was like
32.
low 30s, like 30, 31, 32, something like that, right? So like, I mean, that just shows you that there are obviously there's a lot of pent-up demand for those first-time home buyers. And we're like, that's been pent up for years, and we're going to see that continue to be pent up for more years into the future. And that's why, like, these lower price points, you know, if you're under like 750-ish, like, it's really got a huge bid under them, because, you know, we've just had this affordability crunch. Even the median like age of buyers in general, that number's like almost at 60 now. So like, which is crazy. I mean, so it's like, you know, it just, to me, those numbers are just so like astonishing, because like, there really is more pent up demand than people think.
For sure. No, and I think the pent up demand and the low inventory is going to continue to drive the market. And, you know, if rates start coming down, you know, it's going to get more competitive, even more so. So, Quentin, thank you for jumping on, for showing your face on the channel. As I mentioned before, you're going to start seeing Quentin around more often, as we partnered up here to really make sure that you're set up for success as a buyer or seller in the Chicago real estate market. We're here to be a resource. If you have any questions about getting onto our platform, we're more than happy to set you up on your own custom search through our Compass app. We also have something called a 3-phase marketing plan, Compass private exclusives. We have a lot of real cool tools as a company with Compass that are going to benefit you as a buyer. And so if you have any questions about any of that, or any of the things that we talked about, if you need a lender recommendation, attorney recommendation, or you just want to reach out to Quentin and myself to start the process of buying and selling a home here in Chicago, we'd be absolutely thrilled and would love to support you in that. So if that's the case, feel free to just text the number on the screen, and a team member or myself or Quentin will get in touch with you within 24 hours. So Quentin, thank you so much for being on the channel today, and go out there and help some buyers buy some homes and help some sellers sell.
There you go.
All right, man. Well, until next time, we'll see you on the next video. All right, so we hope that's been a helpful summary of some of the different things that are happening in the Chicago real estate market. Hopefully you've taken away some valuable insights, some valuable trends, and you've really got a better idea of how this current market impacts you with your buying and selling. So if you have any questions, like we said before, like we'll continue to say, please do us a favor and reach out to our team. Just text the number on the screen and a team member or myself will get in touch. Until our next video, we'll talk to you soon. All right, peace.